for this week's Nerd Football segment of the week is Eric Eager, friend of the show for a long time. He's been at Pro Football Focus for a number of years now. And we're going to get to this. We're going to play a clip that we found of you just going hot take bonkers. But we're going to play a little teaser clip, and we're going to get to this later in the show.
This team sucks, and they are going to suck the rest of the year. And not only that, unlike teams like the Chargers, unlike teams like the Dolphins, the Vikings have no plan B at quarterback. You are going to have to watch Kirk Cousins run out the string on a 3-13 team. That sucks. I'm sorry, Vikings fans. I try to tell you.
Just bringing the heat. I think you spoke for a lot of people after this 0-2 start, Eric.
That it sucks because the bet the Vikings made 2-3 years ago when they went out and got Kirk Cousins, the deck is shuffled so much differently now, right? And I think the hardest part of this entire thing was they built this team around a defense, and Kirk was supposed to be this I think about defense. If you think about sports betting, I think about to win the Super Bowl with a defense is like a 5-team parlay, right? You need to make sure that everything works or else the whole bet is broken up. And Kirk was kind of that extra minus 400 money line that you put in there that just juices it up a little bit. But but in reality, now, on defense, so many of those things went away that the entire thing flops, even though some of the parts are great. And now they're left with now they're left in this purgatory here where, the last time I think about it was 2013 was the last time they were either A, not good, or B, had nothing really to look forward to. And I feel like Vikings fans, that's a depressing thing for them moving forward.
So in these first two games, the eye test has been terrible. If you just sat down and watched these games, it's been bad. But Eric, you delve into a realm that goes beyond that and actually goes into the why and looks at things that we probably don't on a daily basis when we're trying to examine why the Vikings are so bad look at. From that analysis, analytical standpoint, how bad have these first two games been?
The passer rating often is a flawed stat, but when you look at it in the extremes, it makes a lot of sense. So Kirk was twice as bad as a quarterback who just would have dropped back and thrown the ball into the dirt every possession, every play against the Colts. And, that obviously you don't need any more there. Against Green Bay, it was a little bit tricky, right? Because in the second half of that game, in fact, he had some statistics that were second to only Aaron Rodgers, his opponent in that game, in the second half of the game. But if you look at sort of when these games are being won and lost, Kirk Cousins and the Vikings passing offense is dumping a half of an expected point every single time they drop back to throw. And a lot of that is interceptions, but a lot of that is taking sacks, right? Sacks are worth 2 points to the defense every single time they happen. And in fact, literally worth 2 points in two cases for the Vikings so far this year. So, there was some positives you could take from the offense in week one, but there were almost none in week two. And it's exactly what we talked about this offseason. When they don't have a lead and when they're facing a quarterback on the opposite side that can go toe to toe with them, the defense is going to respect play action less. They're going to, Kirk is not going to be able to sneak up on defenses anymore. And with their best player now playing in Buffalo and making Josh Allen look like an NFL quarterback, it's just a recipe for disaster.
So, all right, we can circle back on some of the how bad was it and more of the analytical deep dive, but I think we should just sort of get into the filet mignon here from Eric Eager.
Got to rip that Band-Aid off, aren't you?
There is an article on ProFootballFocus.com in which you reference the quarterback you think you mentioned in that clip we played that the Vikings don't have a plan B at quarterback, and then you wrote about the quarterback you think the Vikings should trade for. So go ahead, sir. The floor is yours.
There's one player I think in the entire NFL that can have a positive impact on the Vikings. Everybody else is either going to cost them too much because they're strapped, or is going to require a draft capital that they don't have. But Jameis Winston had this offseason for basically $1 million guaranteed, and I think $3 million total if he reaches a certain amount, things like that. That's something the Vikings can afford. He's not going to require a first or second round pick. because the New Orleans Saints have already invested a ton of money in both Drew Brees and also Taysom Hill. And the Vikings have 2 third-round picks, 2 fourth-round picks, a number of picks in that sort of range. Jameis Winston, and I bet him to win the passing yardage total last year, and he did. He also threw for 30 interceptions, so there's a lot of variance there. But when you're bad, and the Vikings are bad, variance is your best friend, because with Kirk Cousins, you sort of, and I wrote this, and I think the quote was, known mediocrity is worse than an unknown when you're bad. And Kirk Cousins, unfortunately for the Vikings, is a known average commodity. And that, to me, I don't think can win football games when your upcoming opponents are Ryan Tannehill, who led the league in passing last year, Deshaun Watson, who's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. They have Rodgers again. They have 2 Staffords. They have Bridgewater. They have Minshew, who I'll take over Kirk today. And then they have Brady, Breeze. They have a ton of quarterbacks for whom Kirk on maybe his best day can beat him, but it does. Jameis Winston, I think, is is a quarterback who can make things interesting for Minnesota.
All right, hold on.
Hot Take Cops is recorded on location with the men and women of sports talk. All suspects are innocent until proven guilty in Hot Take Court.
All right, we have to pull you over and at least investigate what's happening in the vehicle here. So the take is that the Vikings should trade for Jameis Winston. Judge Judd Zulgad. What are your thoughts?
Well,
Officer Judd Zulgad.
I need to hear more. I need to hear more about why Winston would be a good acquisition. But beyond that, I need to hear this. Aren't the Vikings better off allowing nature for 2020 to take its course?
So let me piggyback off that for a second, because I'm in that camp, and that I think the best thing that could happen, and by the way, judging by a lot of the feedback that we're getting from our Vikings Vent Line episode on Sunday and the Is the Season Over episode of Purple Daily yesterday, this is the first time in a long time that it feels like 80 to 90% of Vikings fans aren't even really fighting it anymore, that it's just like, oh, those weren't even close losses. Oh, no, the NFC's loaded. Yeah, this doesn't look right. There's 15 rookies. Like, I feel like you've got more people on board the acceptance train in 2020 than you have in a decade here.
Cousins, though, flat out has never been as unpopular as he is right now. Like, for every one person saying, yeah, but Kirk will be fine, I feel now like it's 200 saying, oh, no, he's not fine.
And when's the last time it's been? The last time it was that way was in 2013 when Christian Ponder was the quarterback, right? Like, yeah. where you're basically what they lose in Detroit, they lose in Chicago, and then they lost to Cleveland at home. They lost to Brian Hoyer at home. And by that time, and then they kicked the tires on Castle, and it's like, oh, this sucks too. And the whole fan base is like, okay, there's literally nothing to be excited about. And back then, right, like the thing to be excited about was they're probably going to get a new head coach. And even though we do have precedent of Ziggy Will firing a coach 10 games into a contract extension, like I'm more thinking about it from the perspective of Zimmer and Spielman, which is like, what do you have to do to actually show good faith here? Because if you go 14 straight games with Cousins is not built for this, right? Cousins is not built to play for a team that's not made, right? He's built to sort of be inserted into a team with great weapons, which they don't have, and a passable defense, which they don't have. And to me, like, the only thing that keeps this interesting is, okay, but at the same time, Cousins is not so bad that they're going to win. I said 3-13 on the show. I'm being hyperbolic, but they're not bad enough with Cousins to go 2-14. They're probably a 5-11, 4-12 team, which is going to keep them a safe distance away from the Justin Fieldses and the Trevor Lawrences that they need. And they just traded a number 2 pick for Yannick Ngakoue, which they would probably need to move up to, the number 1 or 2 spot to get that quarterback. The way in which you sort of play the season out is you put Winston in there. And if Winston averaged more yards per attempt last year than Kirk, he led the league in passing yards. If he gives you positivity, now you're dealing with the former number 1 overall pick. It's kind of like the Sam Bradford thing again. There's a ton of, I think, optimism. if he flames out, then you actually have a chance to go 2-14, which is exactly what you want. So I feel like that's that's part of the solution.
I love this, except for one problem: the extension to Kirk, which means it's damn near impossible cap-wise to get rid of him after this year. So how are we going to, if you get Winston, how are we going to get around that one?
But I think that's a sunk cost, though, right? Because from what I understand about this deal, like it's N+1, right? So if you go with Kirk next year, it's impossible to get rid of him until year 3, right? So at some point Kirk's deal is such that at some point you're going to eat a dead year unless he makes it all the way to the final end of the deal, which again, the Vikings have shown no commitment to just letting him play out the string, right? This was his last year, and they were like, well, I guess we got to, maneuver a little bit so we can sign Michael Pierce.
Right. And that's the amazing thing. Like they literally said, like, this is the most obvious mulligan ever, is like, in order to sort of like take money off of they wanted to clear money for 2020 for a Michael Pierce and just give themselves some breathing room. And so they said, all right, we'll extend Kirk to get some of that cap relief for 2020 to give us a better chance to compete in 2020 with some free agents and keep him around for another year or two of guarantees. It's like, if you knew Michael Pierce was going to just opt out, you would have just let Kirk Cousins play out the string, like, and go find a different interior defensive lineman. So bad luck sort of plays into the whole thing too. But the Vikings ultimately were the ones that decided to give him $60+ million additional guaranteed.
They're going to have to eat a year on Cousins unless he makes it out to year 3, right? So either they make that decision now and take it in 2021, which is probably not so bad if they're playing a rookie quarterback. Like the teams that are smart with their money, generally speaking, pair a veteran contract with a rookie contract. So you look in Cleveland, Myles Garrett's making a ton of money. Baker Mayfield's not. You look in, some of the teams that have, or that draft, like, so in San Francisco, Jimmy Garoppolo makes a ton of money, but Nick Bosa doesn't, so at premium positions, you generally speaking want one guy making a lot of money and one guy on a rookie deal. In Minnesota, it's going to be kind of shifted there because it's going to be like dead money Kirk with, low money, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Trey Lance. But I think it still makes some sense because, ultimately speaking, like all the teams except for like one or two in recent years have had a quarterback on a rookie deal or a Tom Brady deal and have won the Super Bowl.
So you bring up the thing that drives me as a sports fan / follower the most crazy, and that's this. And you are dead on right about Kirk. As the pressure starts to subside because your team sucks, he gets better. So what drives me crazy is if you are an athlete who's failing, I want you to fail. You're bad. Just be bad.
Just stay down, Dan.
Yeah, just stay. No, but if you give up 4 first period goals, just suck for the last 2 periods and let's go home. Lose the game, get your draft pick. What drives me nuts here and what this guy is going to do, and I can feel it deep in my bones, is this sucker is going to look and say, well, we're 2-6. Hey,
it's Kirk time.
Now it's Kirk time. Exactly. And as Collar says, and it's the greatest line, here come the stats. And he's right every single time. In fact, you know what? Kirk Cousins is going to be, I put him on for 2020, a really quality overall fantasy league season because those stats are coming. And this is what drives me nuts about it.
It feels very Jaguars-like,
and I
right?
get so mad about this.
Like Blake Bortles had a couple good fantasy seasons because the Jaguars
but
were
Eric's
always like
right
down
about
by
this.
20 points.
Eric's right about this. He's not bad enough to just be like, we're 3-13.
He's going to give you, we were calling them Herculean efforts. He's going to give you some like fourth quarters that are really going to drive up your fantasy. He's like, I think their schedule's hard enough where there's no gimmies, but like there's going to be like a game or two at the end of the year. So like it kind of feels like the 2010 season where like you go 3-3 down the stretch, and then you kind of play it safe with Frazier and McNabb the next year. And it's like, at least they drafted Ponder. So it's not a completely close comparison, but it's like, that's what I worry about. If they start, 1-7 or 2-8, and then they finish like 3-2 down the stretch or something, and people are like, "Oh, I saw a lot of positivity." You can convince yourself that some of the rookies, Justin Jefferson might have, do well down the stretch. Some of those corners, you might see Ezra Cleveland at left tackle, and you can sort of convince yourself that everything's good. When in reality, the same fundamental issues will still be in place. I mean, right now, to win with defense in the NFL, you need to draft well, you need to sign good free agents, and you need to coach well. The Vikings have one of those. And moving forward, like it's still like, and I think this speaks to your point against Winston, which is just let Zimmer's philosophy be exposed and for what it's worth and move on, because it's an antiquated philosophy. It relies on luck, for example, the 2015 draft and how well they did there. And that's just not simply going to happen to the Vikings in all likelihood over the next few years. So let it play its course, get a offensive minded coach, tank again, then get a high draft pick quarterback. I just see that the Winston process just gets the Vikings so much quicker to the truth. Whether it's 2-14 or whether it's 7-9, but hey, look, Jameis is actually pretty good in this offense type of thing.
You know what's funny, though, about Jameis is if Mike Zimmer got annoyed by the recklessness, quote unquote, of Case Keenum 3 years ago, what is going to happen when Jameis Winston pulls a 5-interception game or something
Gary Kubiak
in this hypothetical?
Quits week 8. Gary Kubiak would walk away.
Don't you think, though, that if Zimmer – so here's the thing. I'm not completely shut down on Zimmer being the coach of this team for 5 more years, but he has to evolve, right? And part of that evolution would have to be to tolerate the high variance that comes with most quarterbacks. I mean, aside from Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes, even like Drew Brees was terrible last night. Like almost every quarterback in the league that has talent has clunker games. Zimmer's wishes of having a quarterback who sort of gets him on the green every single game, I think, is a farce. That guy just doesn't have a very good driver. The Bridgewater was the closest approximation to it, but even now we see how limited Teddy is.
Yeah. So this is the big thing that I have been wrestling and fighting with Vikings fans about. Not only right now, I think more people are open to this discussion now with Kirk Cousins, but even like a year ago and 2 years ago, when I was open to the Kirk Cousins idea, if not praising it, when they signed him 3 years ago. Because listen, like, I don't think Keenum's the guy. Teddy Bridgewater needs more time, and this is a win now situation. Now, Lamar Jackson was available in the draft, and in retrospect, that would have been an amazing decision. But I'm not going to rip them for the initial signing of Kirk Cousins. But once we saw him play for a season, and you got to see the same things that Washington fans said, my question became, okay, when the opportunity presents itself, what's the risk of moving on from Kirk Cousins? And I think there's this feeling because you know what you have with this Vikings team and with Kirk Cousins up to this point, and it's like it's comfortability. You know that he's going to be able to he's competent. He's going to throw for 4,000 yards. He's accurate. He can throw deep balls. Like, he's not going to go out there and be Christian Ponder on a week-to-week basis anyway. He's going to give you those performances, but over the course of a season, he's going to give you a competent, fairly well-measured season. And that's a very comfortable place to be in if you're a fan or an organization. And I've always sort of challenged and said, well, people are viewing it as like, well, if you're going to move off Cousins, you better know what's behind door number 2. Like, it's a huge risk. And I say, well, there's a reason why Kirk Cousins was available in the first place. Ryan Fitzpatrick's always available. Nick Foles is always available. Like, there's that second
Jameis cost the Saints $1 million.
Correct. Cam Newton was available. Right. Yeah. So like there's always a door number 2 of that sort of second, third tier class. To me, Eric, the risk is in an historic quarterback draft in 2021. If this pans out the way that we think, and even like Tanner Morgan might wind up being a guy that gets drafted like in the first round. Like, there's guys available for rookie contracts that could change your franchise. It is much, much more of a risk to go into that draft and not be open-minded to finding your 10-year guy than it is to let Kirk Cousins go.
100%. And that's the thing. A rookie. So the Vikings are in dire straits from a salary cap perspective in many ways. I know they can get around it, and the salary cap is fake for any one deal, but the collection of deals, the salary cap is not fake. And take a look. So I get what you're saying. And it highlights the different objective functions between Zimmer and Spielman, who, I hate to say this, but for guys like them, the goal is preservation more than anything, right? And that's going to lead them to act differently than a fan of the Vikings who's been following the team for 50, 60 years and have seen no Super Bowl champions, right? The objective function was different for Andy Reid, who was year after year after year in the playoffs, 4 NFC title games, got the Kansas City Chiefs to back-to-back AFC West titles for the first time in their history. He had a Hall of Fame career. When he went And in 2016, tried to trade up for Paxton Lynch and failed. And then in 2017, traded up, gave up the Tre'Davious White pick, who's a great corner, to go up and get Patrick Mahomes. His objective function was to win the Super Bowl.
Yes.
And because, again, when you look at Kansas City, they went from being a team under Marty Schottenheimer, perennially good, but not good enough to win the big one. And they took a swing on, this is going to make you laugh, Elvis Gerbach, after they took a swing on Montana, never made it, bottomed out, got back to being good. But again, eventually, and I was at a Chiefs playoff game when they lost and the fans were upset and they were a 12-4 team. It's never good enough unless you win the Super Bowl. And there are people who understand that, like Andy Reid, and they take swings. And if he would have swung at Paxton Lynch, he would have missed and he would have been fine with it because the process was good. Takes the swing at Patrick Mahomes. 2 years later, he's a Super Bowl champion. And that fan base is finally satisfied. This Vikings fan base, it was never going to be satisfied with what Kirk could give them. 10-6. You went on the road and beat a 13-3 team. That's amazing. That's a great accomplishment. Still not good enough. And I think,
by the way, nor should it be. This franchise for 50 years has been good, not great. Deserves a Super Bowl. What's the blueprint to win a Super Bowl? And if it hurts Kirk Cousins' feelings, I don't give a rip.
But let's talk about, but the problem is if you want to begin the process that Reid began with is also what? Longtime offensive coach who's who to use Eric's word is adaptable and saw where the league was trending. The problem before we even open up the door of process with the Vikings, your problem is this. That coach was hired to win based on what? Defense. Entirely defense. Quarterbacks, I've said this before, I'll say it again. In his world are necessary evils. Just give him one and hopefully that works. Spielman, Ponder, huge strike. Teddy, too bad. But the fact is that Rick, in his time as being in charge of the 53-man personnel of the Vikings, has never been able to find, some bad luck, some bad picks, a quarterback. So before we even can get to, hey, what's the process here? The people trying to execute the process probably aren't the right people to win a Super Bowl. Are they good enough to win games? Absolutely. Yeah. Division titles? Absolutely. But Reid had gotten to the point, too, where he had been doing this so long, had evolved offensively, and saw, you know what? Alex Smith is pretty damn good. And guess what he's never going to do? Win a Super Bowl. So this actually has to start with the Wilfs, I think, not with Rick or Mike, because the Wilfs have to identify who is the guy who, when he does start the process, is starting it right. And the Vikings just right now, as far as if we're talking about ultimately a Lombardi trophy, they're just not there.
The Chiefs went from 1993 until 2018 and won one playoff game the entire time. And it was because that was the only game during that stretch where they had the better quarterback. They had Alex Smith, and the Houston Texans had Brian Hoyer. Every single other game, it was Alex Smith versus Ben Roethlisberger, Alex Smith versus Tom Brady, Alex Smith versus Andrew Luck. And if you and that's the thing, the Vikings got lucky in the Superdome because they had the worst quarterback and still won the game. Generally speaking, that's not going to happen. And the only way that happens is if you get one of those elite guys. And generally speaking, I mean, when's the last big name free agent quarterback that has worked out long-term for a team was Drew Brees. And that was 15 years ago. You just don't get him that way. And so, and when you go ahead and draft a quarterback, it affords you so many flexibilities. The Chiefs signed Sammy Watkins to a 3-year, $48 million. Sammy Watkins made more money than Stephon Diggs the last 3 years, and he's their number 3. Like that, it's such a luxury. They can trade a first-round pick for Frank Clark. They can go get Tyrann Mathieu, and it doesn't kill them because their quarterback is drastically underpaid for the production that they're giving him. And the Vikings have to skimp everywhere else.
But I am Vikings fan, and I'm saying, but Eric, you brought up Christian Ponder. What if they move on from Cousins and they draft another Ponder and it's a whiff? And my answer to that is,
who cares?
Well, that's what happens. But he's going to make $30 million less, so you can bolster the roster around him because he's not making $33 million. And guess what? As horse crap as Christian Ponder was, the Vikings won the division and went 10-6 with him. And they didn't win a playoff game, but because they were able to build the roster around him. And so it's literally the same result at the end of the day, but I'd take the upside of that guy working out and turning into potentially another, if Dante Culpepper, for instance, is the last guy that resembles a long-term franchise quarterback here. It's been 15 years.
There's a media member in you guys' market that famously said this isn't Detroit. This isn't Detroit. You have the Vikings at this point have been good, not great for so many years. The goal is not to get to 10-6. You can get to 10-6 with anybody. It's the goal is to win the Super Bowl. And if you go 10 years of being terrible to try to get to that goal, does anybody in 2009, did anybody care that the Vikings were mostly terrible from 2001 to 2008? No, because eventually that path led you to to being on the doorstep of the Super Bowl. No one cares about those intermediate years. I mean, it's like, you guys talk about the Twins, like the White Sox were good, 1 year in the aughts decade, and they won the World Series that year. No one gives a crap about the other years, right? And Twins fans are all disappointed about all the years where they couldn't even win a playoff game despite being pretty good.
Yeah, because they wouldn't trade for Cliff Lee in 2010.
Yeah, they didn't want to give up Brian Dunsing.
Make the aggressive move.
But you're right. Executives and coaches ordinarily think, but if we're good, we won't get fired.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Not how can I potentially sell out to win a championship? But I don't blame Vikings fans one bit. I mean, look, Cousins was brought here for one reason. To be the final cherry on top to win a Super Bowl. He wasn't brought here to be good and, you can make playoffs. He was brought here because coming off of the 13-3 2017 season, they identified Keenum as a potential weak link and said, who's the best quarterback that we can possibly get? Not to continue to just be good, but to win a Super Bowl. And they're not going to come close.
Yep.
It's not going to come close.
Real quick here. Go ahead. No, Eric, go ahead.
And again, fans think this way because people in football think this way, and it's no more apparent. You saw it in LA this weekend. The Chargers had the Kansas City Chiefs on the ropes, and when they got the ball in overtime, punted on 4th and 1. And people asked Anthony Lynn, well, why did you do that? He said, it gave us the best chance to extend the game. Not to win the game, but to stay in the game. And when you think about people's incentives in this league, they are different than ours.
Gosh, it's amazing. Well, if you want to read Eric's full article, pff.com, we suggest becoming a member and getting some of the goodies that you can find the grades. But this has been great. I mean, these are the types of discussions that I think fans and the Vikings should be having. Like, take a long look in the mirror and really figure out what you want a Super Bowl. What is it really going to take to get you to a Super Bowl? So, Eric, we appreciate you as always, man. We'll talk again soon.
See you later, man.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's keep it here. We'll say goodbye to Eric, and coming up here in a second, Anthony Barr is out for the year, so we have to touch on just how impactful that's going to be for the Vikings defense. But a quick shout out here, Federated Mutual Insurance Company. Federated has been standing behind business owners since 1904 in the state of Minnesota, based in Owatonna. They're one of us. What the hey? When you need Federated and you need trusted resources and peace of mind as a business owner, they are here to help you with a face-to-face relationship. And at Federated Mutual Insurance Company, they also have a Twitter account that passes out value on a regular basis to its followers. Federated INS, at Federated INS on Twitter. Remember, at Federated Insurance, it's our business to protect yours. Also, remember the Corona Hard Seltzer Ultimate Home Tailgate Party. We're giving away a 65-inch TCL TV with a soundbar, $200 worth of Grunhofer's meats, and $100 to MGM Wine and Spirits for you to, I don't know, go buy some Corona Hard Seltzer. You can enter very easily for free. You download the free Score North app, SKOR North. It's free in the Apple and Google Play stores. If you already have it, just open it. Make sure your name and email are registered, and then click on the Listener Rewards link in the top right corner, and boom, you can have a chance to win the Corona Hard Seltzer Ultimate Home Tailgate Party. Anthony Barr, Danielle Hunter's out. We don't know how long. Anthony Barr, the highest paid non-quarterback on the team, is now out for the season with a torn pec.
Yep.
So how do you think that impacts the Vikings defense, which has already been terrible through the first 2 weeks?
Well, I think the initial inclination of most fans will be to say, well, who cares? I didn't basically see him for 2 games, but
for 2 years.
But it's a big deal because you are already pretty shorthanded at linebacker. I think they're going to have to promote one from the practice squad or sign a guy off the street. Look, to me, it's just another sign from the football gods. It's not going to be your year, so accept it. I'm so at peace with what they've looked so bad and they've lost more guys. And I wouldn't bring Hunter back for as long as possible. He's got a neck problem. Okay, so let's take it seriously, which I think they will. Barr is out now. These are all signs to me that it's really just time to say, I'm going to play the young guys as much as possible.
Yeah.
And Phil, I agreed with your point from the show earlier that you don't want to ruin the Dantzlers or Gladneys completely by exposing them consistently to defeat and also being beaten by receivers. But I think if you take the right tone and conversation and use this as a year for them to get beat and learn and make decisions, Holton Hill, Mike Hughes, Dantzler, Gladney, right?
Coyle.
Nina Ryder,
Wilson.
Gronlund.
Oda Kendricks.
I think if you use this in the right way and you don't melt down on players and you don't lash out, but yet you develop them, that's what this year is about.
I mean, is that
I'm really there.
Is that what Mike Zimmer signed a contract extension? And obviously, when you're an NFL head coach and someone offers you millions to remain an NFL head coach, you sign the damn deal.
Mm-hmm.
But is that what he signed up for? Did you think Mike Zimmer signed up to sit here in a transition year at best? This is a transition year at best now, because at worst it's a train wreck.
Yep,
and it gets people fired.
Yep,
but at best it's a transition year. I think I would be concerned whether Mike Zimmer is 100% in on that process or not, which he went through in 2014 with the team. I would be most concerned that you're going to have a bunch of rookies with no offseason workouts, nothing. And other teams have this problem too, but like specifically to the Vikings, you're going to have some cornerbacks that are highly skilled and talented, and Ezra Cleveland's going to come in at some point, and other players.
Yeah, start Sunday for me at guard, right
and
guard,
they're
or left guard.
And you're not reporting that, by the way.
No, but he would start Sunday. I would say
okay.
I said he would start Sunday for me.
Just want to clarify.
If I were the coach.
That those players' confidence is going to be shot to hell because it's just like not a great environment in 2020 to be thrown into that fire. But the Vikings might not have a
Zimmer
choice.
caused this. He's clearly the one that didn't go out and try and get Spielman to pursue veteran cornerbacks, right? Like Mike bit this off and clearly thought that it could work, and it's not. So develop them. Because we do go back to the one thing, unless he is just unwilling to do it, and if that's the case, you've got a problem. But the one thing that we can rely on is that it can take some time, but Mike Zimmer can develop corners, right? So develop them, learn. And now if he comes to me and says, bleep this, I'm not going to do this, then you've got a problem. But I think if you're going to take the positive from what we've seen from these first two games, which have largely been non-competitive ass-kicking games, if you're the Vikings, towards you have to say, what can we get from this? And that's development. And look, you might start to win some games. I don't know. But you set this in motion, and the loss of Hunter and Barr certainly hurts. But you set, personnel-wise, a lot of this in motion yourself. So work with it. Mm-hmm. And I would much rather see now Hughes, Dantzler, Gladney all develop than I would say, well, let's now sign veteran guys at 0-2 and forget them, because they are in 2021. Guess what? They're going to be really important players again.
Final verdict on Eric Eager's take. Would you guys float a mid-round pick for Jameis Winston?
I would.
The Vikings would never do it.
Much fun.
The Vikings would never do it, but I love his thought process, which is Winston is either going to completely sink you, which I love the thought of, or he's going to pleasantly lift you up, and if that's the case, you found something.
Also worth noting, okay? Half of his interceptions came in 3 games. So you take those 3 games and you flush them.
Odds are better
You're going to lose 3 games because he's going to throw 4 picks.
But what if he just sinks you? That's the key. Because Kirk's problem is he's on the Titanic and there is one lifeboat left, and he's going to grab that sucker and pad his stats and everyone else is going to die. And he's going to grab that lifeboat and jump in and sail away and throw his touchdowns. I mean, that's what's going to happen. When the pressure is off, this guy's going to have some great games because there's no pressure.
Well,
and he's going to start chucking.
Well, Kirk's a good, a veteran guy that is.
Oh, okay.
Kirk's a good, a veteran guy.
He's a guy I know.
That Duck and Goff, he's a good producer.
He's around.
He's okay. He's a guy.
He's around.
You guys, he is
here.
Kirk is a necessary evil in Mike's world. He's nothing more. Quarterbacks, man. But once Teddy broke Zim's heart, it was over. He's the spurned dude that we all know.
Somebody
He's never dealing
Somebody sent me a great
with
meme for
quarterbacks
this.
again.
Somebody sent me a great meme. My buddy Mike Trudell, who's been covering the Lakers out in Los Angeles for like 12 years, but he's from here. He's a big Vikings fan, so we text about the Vikings. I don't know if I can read this whole thing on here. It's more of a visual, but so it's got the pictures of the Vikings like last 6 quarterbacks, and it's got like a description of them. Have you seen this?
Yes, it's on my Instagram story right now.
So it's Brett Favre, and it says Brett Favre is the cougar mom who let you do things other girls wouldn't. Ooh, but accidentally, I won't read the rest of this. Just like a little fling that you had. Okay.
All right.
Christian Ponder was the 8 out of 10 that you thought was pretty good looking until you found out that she couldn't couldn't read and drooled a bit, which is great. Teddy Bridgewater was the high school sweetheart who died on prom night.
I shouldn't laugh. That's so true. Oh, that's so true in Zimmer's world. Oh,
Sam
man.
Bradford was another fling. Case Keenum was the better than you expected one night stand that you couldn't quite commit to.
Story of my life.
And Kirk Cousins is the inevitable divorce that cost you half your money and your youth.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's
not that far.
It's unfortunate, man.
Yeah. So that is, well, there's so many other things we're going to get into this week. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into.
I can't really see it all the way, but that's some of it. Unfortunately,
what?
I tried to get the photo up on the screen, but
I think we should just keep it off.
It's too long. It's too long.
It's too long, and it's a little inappropriate.
A little too spicy.
Yeah. We're PG here. PG here in Purple Daily, but we got to get into throughout the rest of the week on Purple Daily. Just other discussions off this, including, is it really time to put your energy into playing 15 rookies and tanking for Trevor? Like, let's do a deep dive into that this week. There's actually mock drafts out there already with the 0-2 teams that show you like who would draft who at this point and where they would be in the order. And what is the probability of the Vikings just bouncing back? Like, could they just bounce back this season? So we'll talk about all those things the rest of the week on Purple Daily. We appreciate everyone who has been listening and downloading our podcast, Apple, Spotify, and scorenorth.com, and the people who have clicked subscribe on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Purple Daily Podcast. We saw record numbers for Vikings Vent Line on Sunday. It helps when the Vikings are just a disaster and we're here as your therapists. But that's a wrap on this episode, and we will see you guys tomorrow.